I'm going to go back to Michael. I'm going to go back also to a topic we were discussing earlier. It's a shame you weren't here, actually, Michael. We were discussing our favourite friend, William Lane Craig, and his views on objective morality. And
that's definitely one of my favourite topics.
Amongst things we were doing was to set out what we considered Craig was referring to when he talked of objective morals. And I think he makes it fairly clear. They are values that exist independent of the human mind.
Right.
Now, I think that concept is of itself absolutely absurd. What are your views?
I think there's a lot of different ways that objectivity can be defined, and it's important to discuss actually just purely what people mean by objective. Because, again, it leads to a lot of confusion. I think there is a deep sort of confusion in William Lane Craig's philosophy when he speaks about objectivity in morality. Because he wants to take, and he says he takes, a divine command theory, that essentially it's not dependent on human minds, but it is still dependent on a mind, which is God's mind.
Pausing you there, Michael, I think that he does make a difference between objective values and divine command theory.
Yes, yeah, he says first that he is a divine command theorist, but he's unlike most other divine command theorists because he believes that the divine command receives its sort of normative force from the nature of God, and the nature of God is some sort of objective property.
And can I just very briefly interject?
Sure.
The important point that this divine command theory is not a theory in any scientific sense. This is a theory in the bastardized popular sense that it's his pet idea. Because theories in science actually have explanative and predictive capability, and this is neither.
Well, I think there's sort of a point there because even in moral theory, where it's definitely not a scientific theory, it's not anything we'd consider up to the same standards or carrying the same standards that we'd expect from a chemistry or physical theory, or theory in physics, I should say. One of the things that a moral theory should do is account for our sort of moral intuitions. And they should be able to both predict and explain the way we think about morality and lead us, I think, through certain ethical dilemmas. And that's something certainly that his type of ethical theory can't do. In fact, like the biggest criticism of Craig came from Dawkins with Craig's sort of ad hoc justification for genocide in the Bible. And there it seems very clear that Craig is running extremely counter to, I think, the moral intuitions that any sane person would have, which is that genocide is always wrong and that it's wrong to kill innocent people. So, again, I think there is a point there, Thunder, that there is an element missing, and it's really hard to grasp exactly how the normative force is derived in any way from his notion of ethics.
One of the points, just very quick if I may, Thunder, one of the points that I made earlier on in the show was that I used the example of Joseph Fritzl in a recent video and made the comment that we would all think that Joseph Fritzl's actions were evil, and we would label him as evil and a monster and the like. Now, the fact that all of us would say that, well, there may be one or two that don't, but let's say all of us say that, the accusation has been made against me that means that in some way I support the concept of objective moral values. But my point was, and I think concordance referred to it as being universal as opposed to objective. Would you agree with that? I mean, if everyone thinks that Fritzl is evil, can that in any way to be described as objective or merely a summation of subjectivism?
Was that to Thunder or to me?
To you.
Oh, okay. Again, this is
I'll
why...
come to you, Thunder. Sorry.
Sure. No, I don't think that everyone's agreement is the same thing as objectivity. Objectivity, in I think the only sense that actually is coherent, means that sort of the moral normative force is derived from objective properties of either a certain state of affairs or a certain rational construct or a rational agreement. So, like, when we say happiness is good or like suffering is bad, no one has to exist for that to be true. There doesn't have to be any suffering in the world for suffering to still be bad, because it's a property of suffering that it contains a certain level of normative force. Another way to put it, too, on the other side, speaking about everyone's agreement, is that really doesn't establish anything. It just establishes a sort of consistency among people. It could still be subjective. It's just many people's subjective opinions that are kind of put
That's
together.
exactly my point, and this is what irritates me about Craig, because and again, I don't think you were here, when I refer to him only ever using two examples. One is the Nazis and one is rape, where he knows he's going to get universal agreement about those points. And I just do not see universality having anything to do with something being called objective. Thunder, you wanted to chip in.
The first one was to play devil's advocate. Has everyone here seen the film Watchmen?
Has anyone here seen the film?
Yes. Have you seen that,
Yeah,
PPL?
totally. Yeah.
I haven't, no.
Okay, so the whole thing is essentially a play on morality. Is it ethical to kill 100 million innocent people to save 6 billion? This is the choice of whatever Ozymandias at the end, that he knows that the only way to save mankind from total annihilation is to kill 50 million, however many million people. And he does it. And now this is genocide. It's killing 50 million random innocent people. Did he make the right choice?
I think to avert nuclear war, which would have been an end to all life, and human and non-human, I think, yeah.
Well, there's a more topical one, isn't there? I mean,
no, I mean, we have here all the characters of Watchmen. Michael, what do you think?
I think it's actually explained in both the comic and in the film that the only reason why it was right to kill all of these people is so long as no one knew that it was set up from the beginning. And it's sort of alluded to towards the end of the comic and in the film that everyone's going to find out because they'll find Rorschach's diary.
Okay, let's leave.
Can I bring it on to a
but
more,
it points out. It actually
no,
DPR.
I want to see the.
No, I'm trying to help you here, Thunder, because I think the example you're using is perhaps not one that is clearly identifiable in people's minds, but here's one that is. Obviously, we could look at 9/11. Would it have been right to shoot down a plane that contained a lot of innocent people in order to save, the consequences of the plane's crashing? Or even more topical one, at the moment, there are a whole host of ground-to-air missiles being placed around London to prevent the Olympic Games being sabotaged by a hijacked plane. So clearly, I mean, and I was just saying, I'm just trying to help Thunder to put it in a more tangible way, because that this is real life, not cartoon. Is it right to shoot down the plane to save the stadium full of people? Is that not a better analogy that people can
and the nice thing about the Watchmen argument is it's very clear. You know for certain that killing 50 million will save 6 billion, right? And once we've dealt with that, you then come to the Rorschach, who sees everything in black and white. For him, you always do what's right, even if it means risking the entire population of the planet. You do what's right.
Okay, I see where you're coming from. Right.
So, Mike, you were saying about Ozymandias's choice.
Yeah, it's that one of the classic arguments against sort of the utilitarian consequentialist version of ethics is that you don't actually know what the consequences of your actions will always be. So it could have been, it's not actually explained in the book, but it could have been actually that the Cold War starts up again, and that's right. Alluded to.
But in many ways,
it's dependent really on the fallibility of human beings which they sort of talk about. They make the person who makes this decision the smartest man in the world, and he has all of the relevant information. However, it's like if we're to draw actual morals out of this, or some actual sort of lessons from it, none of us are like that. It's I think best for people, for a number of reasons, for people to actually follow a given set of rules, because they're more likely to be right and less dependent on sort of chance that you may have got things completely wrong, and then you have two wrongs. You have yourself killing a bunch of innocent people, but then you also have made the situation identifiably worse by allowing it to continue. So it's really a double failing if it goes on that direction.
So I agree completely. Though there are two tiers to this. The first one is what do you think is the best outcome? And then there is the probabilistic. You have to weight those terms by probabilities. What is the probability that I'm right, and what are the consequences of A and B? If I'm wrong, what are the consequences of A and B? So the thing that Watchman does is it says, well, let's take that probability layer out altogether, and you are guaranteed. These are your two guaranteed options. Mm-hmm. Now, in those circumstances, is it right to kill killing millions to save billions?
Right. But again, I would grant and this is why utilitarianism and consequentialism can seem really attractive to a lot of people, is that it works very well under these sorts of conditions, where it's absolute certainty, black or white, you have two options. But again, my point is rather that when we're trying to draw our lessons out of these sorts of things, in real life, we actually don't have that sort of information. And importantly, it's nearly impossible for us to even calculate it properly at any given time.
Right, the thing is that with all of these calculations, you do have the probability layer in there. I agree completely. Yeah. Right, and obviously, as those probability settings can be, there are two extremes. One where there is almost no chance of your decision being right, and the other one where it is 100% chance of being right. So there is a sliding scale between those two settings. Now, if you actually slide it all over to the 100% certainty, is this then the right decision to make? Now, the thing is that these are decisions that are made in reality. And the most obvious example is teaming up with Stalin in World War II. It was known that Stalin was a butcher. It was known that the Germans weren't very nice, but Stalin was arguably the known bigger monster at the time. And to team up with Stalin to fight the Nazis, you are essentially gambling. You're throwing all sorts of lives into the blender here, just because having the Russians fight the Nazis means that less of your guys will die. So the bottom line with all of these things is there are price values put on various lives: the lives of your guys, the lives of their guys, lives of guys you don't really care about. This is fundamentally a utilitarian decision. Now, if you actually take it to the other extreme of the reductionist logic, you take it down to the level of the individual. Is it okay to, if you can save 5 guys from just killing one guy and harvesting his organs, is that right? And most people say no, because individuals have rights. But when you get up to the macroscopic calculations, there seems to be the transition to, what are you talking about? It's obvious that if you've got a choice of 50 million dying or 50 billion, it's the 50 million that got it in the neck.
I'm going to thunder logic concordance.
Okay, go.